I first met Shanks. In fact, I got a telegram before I actually met him. And when I got picked for Scotland, he says, "You're now the best wing half in the world," he says. Not in Scotland, in the world. He said, "When you pull the Scottish jersey over your head, son," he says, "the lion will grow twice the size it is in the jersey. And just run about," he says, "and the jersey will take care of the rest."
What the Scottish football jersey has been asked to take care of is an awful lot. For many Scots, an international match becomes a kind of fever chart of the nation. The graph of national self-confidence has for long been affected by what happens on the football park. A good team is a tonic. A bad one hits the country like a virus. Any player who pulls the emblem of Scotland over his head finds at once a crowd. A good result will send Scottish self-doubt into remission. A bad defeat can amount to a national relapse.
This is Wilshaw's fourth of the match. He's the first man to score 4 in a big match at Wembley.
Gamble.
One great goal can restore some confidence.
3-1! A brilliant individual goal!
I mean, we lump national expectations on 11 lads who happen to be good at playing football. And we do that more than any other country in the world. And it is absurd. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, I think, for it. I mean, football is one of the few games that Scotland plays independently on the world stage. And we don't compete as a separate nation, say, in the Olympics or something like that. So football is overwhelmingly more important than it should be in Scotland, and always has been.
The desire to see what we need to see happening on the field can be intense enough to bring on colour blindness.
It's a penalty kick to Scotland. Up goes the hand and the punch, if ever there was one. McLeish. Oh, that was a push, surely. Is that a goal? It is by Rush. Oh, I thought it was a push.
Well, there's no doubt at all it is the self-destruct. It's, I think we have an good conceit of ourselves. We think we gave the world the game, and what we have forgotten, all of us, is that the world caught up and then overtook us.
That's Junior.
But perhaps if Scots had a surer sense of themselves in other areas, the loss of a goal in a football match wouldn't make them feel that other countries were stealing their birthright.
Yes, Joe Jordan, and it keeps
Or that a near miss was a national disaster.
Oh, Billy Bremner.
Or that a victory means more than being good at a great game.
Nicholas, he's done it! Oh, brilliant play! Oh, what a goal!
Football in Scottish life is about much more than sport. It's really the arena in which Scotland and Scots assert themselves and play a role in international affairs. Scotland is a poor country. That's the main thing to bear in mind. It's not just poor in the financial sense. It's not just poor that people are unemployed. That, of course, is true. But it's poor in the sense that there is no focus for Scottish public life. There's all sorts of minor focuses. There are all sorts of cultural events. There are all sorts of Scottish national institutions. But there's no genuine public focus, no arena for Scotland to assert itself and for the Scottish identity to be seen. And by the way, no place for people to take responsibility for their own actions. So you're forever blaming failures upon the English because they're the guys in charge. And this gets, I think, displaced into football to a very real extent.
When the guys in charge elsewhere remain in charge on the football field, a mild national paranoia can hover near. As one bemused Scottish fan was heard to ask in Argentina, will we ever do anything right? And when we do, we can be just as quick to exaggerate its importance.
Of course, we're accused all the time, as you know, of having a pervasive and very defensive sense of inferiority about the game. I've always insisted that that's not entirely true. I think the truth is that we have a deep-rooted conviction that the rest of the world is conspiring to conceal how marvellous we are.
It's a far-reaching conspiracy. A country as distant and underdeveloped as Peru can act as if they had never heard how good we are.
On top of the single, and it's 1-8.
The emotional importance Scotland has invested in the game of football can often rebound on us.
Space for the shot. Oh,
Scotland had started promisingly enough. The early games against England were sporting contests, so genteel in their intentions that the tickets might have read, "Monocles will be worn." But the popularity of the game with the industrial working classes demanded a more robust commitment. The winning of a Scottish cap came to carry with it a responsibility to match the honour. The players were expected to convey through football, like a code, an expression of Scottish nationality. The need for that expression was always at its most strident against England. A Scotland-England international became a means for Scots to reclaim, however briefly, a separate sense of themselves from the country whose parliament had absorbed their own. The skills of football players became a primitive grammar for expressing feelings that had no other language. The message was essentially a public contradiction of the more patronising assumptions of the English.
I look upon Scotland as part of the British Empire, as it were. You know, I used to brought up as a kid, and we had all that pink on the map, and we used to look and say, isn't it marvellous, you know, look, we own all this. It's gradually receded as the years have gone on, but I hope that Scotland's still with us. And the same with Ireland. And that isn't just affectation. That's the way I was brought up as a kid. And living through the war as a teenager, when, you know, I mean, the Australians, they were fighting for us, the New Zealanders. I have nothing against them. I love them, same as the Scots, just the same in my book. So it is rather strange that they look upon me as some kind of, you know, tribal totem pole to stick pins in all the while. I don't mind. It's quite a compliment, I suppose, really.
It probably isn't meant to be. On the football field, the United Kingdom still shows the joins. Sporting skill is a declaration of difference, and every goal a celebration of a distinct identity.
There's a strong sense that we should do England every time we meet them, and everybody enjoys it. I certainly love doing that. Sometimes I get the feeling that they would forgive us for failure in the World Cup as long as we continue to do the English.
I think we hate you, really. No, I mean it. No holds barred, because I know the same applies. And I've seen it in dressing rooms with Scottish and English players who are combined, at Ipswich, if you like. You know, where this Scottish result v England results has flared up. Not to a punchy situation, but close to it.
In 10 minutes, Johnson hit the bar with a hard
The intensity of the rivalry has meant that a Scottish victory is more than a football result.
Doherty takes a free kick, and it's a goal from 60 yards.
And despite the relief of a spectacular Tommy Doherty goal, Scotland's 7-2 defeat from England in 1955 remains a wound in the memory that no amount of wry humour has quite healed.
Well, used to say it was like Dracula, he hated crosses.
And it's 5-1.
You know, Fred was at a Crocus, like, he came out once a year.
6-1.
I scored one of the goals in the 7-2. I think that's all I did, actually, in the 7-2 match, because the fella I was supposed to be Martin Dennis Walsh, I think he got 3 or 4. And the England murderers, Duncan Edwards, his first game for England as well. But I think the real reason that particular day was that, you know, there were so many Celtic and Rangers players in the team, actually, and we played with an orange ball, actually, and you know, the Rangers players wouldn't kick it, and the Celtic players wouldn't touch it. So maybe that's one of the reasons why we got beat 7-2.
Even more painful for Scots was the 9-3 humiliation in 1961.
You do get friendly matches, and you know, people talk about friendly matches between Scotland and England. Well, I mean, they're friendly to the extent that the players will be shaking hands at the end of it, and but as far as the match itself is concerned, there's going to be 90 minutes effort there. I mean, that is the one match they all want to win. I mean, you asked Bobby Robson what it meant to him to be on the England team that had a victory that I won't dwell on.
As the massacre proceeded, goalkeeper Frank Haffey's black armband began to take on an extra significance.
I got the first, actually. I remember it very well. People blamed Haffey, the goalkeeper. All right, I think in the match he might have dropped a couple, but he wasn't responsible for 9. You were masochists that day. You were damaging your own selves. You didn't know how to defend, didn't want to defend, thought you could go there and win, and that you were so good, like we didn't have a team.
And England's 5th goal came from Bobby Smith.
In the bath after the game, you know, in Wembley, the water's about that deep, you know, about 2 feet deep. And, I mean, 9-3, like, it's the end of the world. And Frank's singing away there, I felt. And he was not a bad chanter, you know, I mean, he was a good singer. And like the other 10 of us were trying to drown ourselves under the water, you know. I couldn't believe it. After the game up that Wembley, and he's at the back, I thought, oh, we'll never get out here alive. Anyway, we did, and I think I stayed at home for about, I don't think I've done for about a week anyway.
Denis Law's part in Scotland's revenge 1 year later must have been especially sweet. A Davy Wilson goal had the fans rejoicing. An Eric Caldo penalty was to set the seal on the Scottish celebrations, which were always at least as excessive as their mourning.
Remember after we beat England at Hampden, it was quite funny. I'm not sure that it was Billy or Jim nicked the ball, and I think it was Billy actually. He might still have it. And we went up to Ardenne. John Coleraine lived there, and we were going to his house to a little party after the game. And we were out in the street with the ball about 2 in the morning, kicking the ball up and down the street. Myself and Jimmy and Mick Jackson, Billy McNeil, John Coleraine. You know, it was incredible to think the afternoon there was 130-odd thousand at Hampden, and we were kicking the same ball at night time in the street in Ardenne. You know, if anybody had looked out the window, they'd have thought we were mental.
That was usually my philosophy. If we used to play against the Scots, it was worth all the effort. Put everything in, think of nothing else, do your proper planning, because it made life that little bit easier in the dressing room for the rest of the season. I mean, Denis Law, who used to come back, you know, Pat Creran when they used to come back, any Scottish player, they always used to love beating the English. And so it made life a lot easier if you beat them in the dressing room.
Dressing rooms in England must have been about as comfortable as saunas after the 1967 game at Wembley. Scotland were playing the new world champions.
I would think if anybody was going to say to me, of all the European teams or the world teams that were going to come to Wembley the year after you'd won the World Cup and beat you, I would have said, well, the most likely to do that would be the Scots.
Jim McCalliog. Oh, McCalliog!
You know the way the Scots' minds go. Was being the team to beat them, we were the world champions. Probably to have played Ethiopia or something at Hampden a few weeks later and lost, because that's the kind of team Scotland were in these days. We could rise to the occasion and then lose to somebody that we shouldn't have lost to.
But we were laughing. Denis and I and Billy had a great laugh. And wee Bally was on about this wee Alan Ball. He was the hero of the World Cup, so to speak. And it was wee Bremner, so he's call him Jimmy Clitheroe. You know the wee comic, the wee short truthers and that, and the wee squeaky voice, that was Bally. So I kept calling him Jimmy Quilt and tried to give him nutmegs and all that. Well, he was going hairy. The man was going potty. We were just laughing. We weren't bothering because we're so much in talk.
Scotland slaughtered England 3-2. It was one of the most characteristically Scottish victories ever against England. The extent of it was not measured in goals, but in the disdainful superiority of Scottish skills over English sweat.
I think if Baxter had missed about, because I always wanted not only to beat England, but to give him a good thrashing. Bob, give him a good thrashing, which we never did. We never ever did it. And I felt that the only time that we might have done was in '67. And Baxter started, you know, tipping the ball up and sitting out.
But the performance had a meaning beyond statistics. It was a celebration of Scottishness the fans could share in.
We went back to the Café Royal anyway. Dennis and I sitting at the banquet, which are bores. Everybody gets something, gives this spill, you know, or a little spiel about absolutely nothing, really. So I says to Dennis, come on, let's go down to the bar. A certain bar we had to arrange with. Christ, we went down there. It was like Wembley all over again. There was this table, about 12 of them sitting around it. The Wembley turf on it. The kitty in the middle, and all the drinks round about it. They'd all pinch a bit of turf. This is in the Café Royal.
After the game, beautiful. I remember the following morning, coming into the hotel, we stayed at the St. Ermin, I think it was, in London, with 2 newspapers. And Bobby Brown was the manager then. And he said, oh, good morning, Dan, it's nice to see you. Nice to see you up bright and early getting the papers. I said, yes, you know, terrific, good, yeah. I was just coming in.
Scottish fans have always seen themselves as a key part of the team. Just as the Scottish players had occupied the Wembley turf as if they owned it, the supporters took possession of it. They would later do the same with London, naturalising it into a Scottish village for the night.
Piccadilly Circus, you can imagine it, after Wembley, thronging with people. Stops at the traffic lights. I looks out the window, who's standing? My dad and my uncle. You wouldn't believe it. So I wind down the window. I says, I've got Dennis Law in the car, and I don't know who, or John Gregg and all that. There were about 5 or 6 of us in the car anyway. And I says, Dad, jump in, we're going to a party. I'll never forget it, my dad. And he's right, Fife accent. Oh, it's all right, son. Me and your Uncle Joe will just go to the pictures.
Wembley in 1967 proved that Scottish fans went there to feed the national eagle. It sometimes seemed as if the English went there partly to watch this strange pastime.
Billy Wright, or one of the lads, said that when Scots score, if they score, which I hope they don't, but if they score, have a look at the big bank behind the goal on the right-hand side. He says, because there'll be about 50,000 people in there, and they'll all look like little birds after a worm from the mother, because there's so many of them, they can't move their arms, you see, and all they can do if they scored a goal was, and they didn't have banners and things like that in those days, all they could do was actually shout and open their mouth. And I remember there was a close call. They didn't score, I don't think, but there was a close call. And I thought, disallowed, but nevertheless, and I turned around and I had a look at this, and unbelievable, I couldn't believe this bank of heads, and they were all just going like, and I thought, hey, that sums it up really right, that, you know.
In 1977, the ability of the Scottish fans to strengthen their sense of identity at the expense of England reached its most spectacular fulfilment. The moment seemed incapable of carrying the weight the supporters wanted to give it. Perhaps the fervour related to the growing desire in Scotland at the time for some form of devolution. It was certainly hard to believe that all that had happened was a Scottish victory at Wembley. It was appropriate that the manager was Ally MacLeod, who would later lead his Tartan army to Argentina.
After the game, when I went to go up the tunnel, the security guard stopped me and said, sorry, you're not allowed up the tunnel. I said, but I'm the national manager. And he says, and I'm Winston Churchill. He says, on your way. And it was Don Revie, who came up to him and says, but that is the national manager. But the punchline is, so he's going to stop me going up when he gets into the dressing room. Here's 4 fans with their clothes off in the bath with Alan Rough.
Anecdote has always been an essential part of the Scottish pilgrimage towards the Wembley Way. Like a modern equivalent of the Border Reivers, the fans love to bring back memories as if they were trophies. Defiance of the English is often the point of the story.
When we banned the Scots from Wembley, there was a wonderful banner up. You know, some of the lads had a banner there, so you thought you could ban us, Mr. Croker, and I've got a photo of it now in my office. I've had it there ever since, and it's one of my sort of treasured memories of football.
I remember getting off the bus one day, probably about 71, 72, and Alan Ball, Alan and myself were English fanatics, right? And I wish sometimes that more of the English players felt the same way that Alan and I did as the Scotch players feel, you know. I mean, they want to beat England so bad. And we're getting off the bus, and just as Alan and myself are getting off, there's a Scotch lad runs up with a kilt on. He's got the kilt and it's blowing in the wind, and he's showing all his brains as it happens, like it's blowing all over. And he run up and butted the bus. He did, seriously, no messing. He butted the bus. And I can imagine him going back to his mate saying, I really stuck it on him, like, you know.
Playing headers with buses is one of Scotland's national sports only against England. No other country affects us in the same way. When Scotland competed in the 1982 World Cup, an estimated 15,000 fans went to Spain. The only assaults were on the eardrums. The Scottish passion for football was seen at its best.
I don't think any fans in the world bring greater fervour or a more self-sacrificing loyalty to the cause than the Scots do. There are enthusiasms that are comparable, such as the passion of the Brazilians. Mind you, they've had a wee bit more to sustain them over the years than we have. No, I don't think we're being outrageous if we say that we have the most remarkably committed fans in the whole of football.
So intense is the Scottish commitment to the national team that it is claimed to spill over from the terracings into the press box. Scottish football reporters have been accused more than once of colouring their reports, usually dark blue. They have been described as fans with typewriters.
I always felt that was rather a nice way to describe us. I mean, I am a supporter with a typewriter. You can't travel around the world with Scotland just sitting there and watching and reporting. I mean, you want them to win. I mean, you're there supporting them. I mean, you've got to be objective about what you write, hopefully. But the lovely story that summed it up to me was that we were playing Peru in the World Cup in Argentina, and we got a penalty. If we'd scored the penalty, we'd have beaten Peru, no doubt at all about that. And I was sitting next to a guy who was doing a piece for commercial radio, and he decided he would commentate on this little piece so he could put it into his package later on that night. And Masson came up to take the penalty. And this guy was saying, Don Masson comes up to take the penalty against Peru that could put Scotland into the quarterfinals of the World Cup for the first time in history. Masson, who's never missed a penalty for Scotland. So it's Masson against Quiroga, the penalty for Scotland.
A brilliant save again by Quiroga.
The next thing that happened was that this guy's microphone came whizzing past my right ear, and he's standing in the stand and he's shouting, I always knew he'd miss it! I always knew he'd miss it! And that sums us up, that come the moments of deep emotional crisis when this football team isn't doing what you want it to do. We're not reporters at all, we're just supporters.
69, Ken. Well, I think there's some substance in the accusation. But the fact is that football in particular has occupied a place of excessive importance in Scottish life for generations. And the exaggerations in attitude that apply to reporters apply to a lot of people in other areas of life.
The national obsession hasn't always had an organisation to match its intensity. In 1954, Uruguay's 7-0 victory reflected differences that weren't confined to the field of play.
When we went to the World Cup in '54 to Switzerland, we took 13 players with 2 goalkeepers in the party. So, you know, I don't know what the situation was, and we had these big grey tracksuits as if we'd sort of borrowed them off the team at Berlin. It was so funny, like, you know, and we went out there and we were training, and we were sweating like nobody's business with these big... and Bobby Collins had on a tracksuit with the fitted George Young and stuff like this, you know. And we were so disorganised, really, that it wasn't true. And we saw these other continental teams like Uruguay and you know, and people like that, and short continental gear and low-cut boots and all the fantastic kit. And we had these big blue jerseys with the big thick collars on them and the big badge and the long sleeves, and you'd have thought we were going to the Antarctic rather than going to a football match, like, you know.
They're trying to get through here, but this is an ultra...
Things improved. It's hard to see how they could have done otherwise. By the early 60s, the horizons of the Scottish game had widened.
Out in front,
the team competed impressively against countries as formidable as Czechoslovakia.
There was lots of great players in Scotland at that time. I mean, there was 5 or 6 in the Rangers team were great players. Alex Scott was a tremendous player. Davy Wilson was a tremendous player. Jimmy, you know, myself, Billy, Dave Mackay, John White. The tremendous squad of players they had at that time. It's a disgrace that we'd never really done better.
White. Through to Scott, and he's onside. Out in front to White. What a chance here. Scotland can press on the attack. Law!
The talent of the team was beyond question, but the professionalism of the Scottish temperament was not.
We go to a playoff in Brussels, where we're leading up until about 10 minutes to go. Czechoslovakia equalise. Goes into extra time. Paddy Crerand and Jim Baxter, who are pals on and off the park, then have a fight over who gets the water first. And the whole thing goes right off the boil. We lose in extra time. And they had the whole Scottish psyche involved. Great players, brilliant football, good teams, silly little row. All ends in a shambles.
In the qualifying rounds for the 1966 World Cup, Scotland showed that they had become realistic competitors for a place in the finals. They didn't make it, but they had at least served notice of the seriousness of their intentions.
That's neatly judged, the push. That's there.
By the early 1970s, Scotland's continuing challenge for a place in the finals was even stronger. In defeating East Germany, the team showed greater maturity than they had often done in the past. Much of their self-confidence had come from their manager, Willie Ormond.
His classic pre-match pep talk against Sweden. He said, well, go out, do your own thing, play as well as you can. He said, and watch out for the big blonde guy. He ran out, there were 7 big blonde guys. The guy he meant, actually, funnily enough, Edstrom, wasn't blonde. But Willie didn't bother much about how the other crowd were going to, what they were going to do. He picked very, very good teams that blended with each other. And to my mind, statistically, he's the best Scottish manager ever.
Another corner to Scotland. The whole of Hampden now willing this equaliser to go in. Here comes the goalkeeper.
Scotland defeated Czechoslovakia to qualify for the 1974 World Cup finals. It had taken a sustained responsibility of purpose to get there, but off the park, the gremlins of irresponsibility could still come out to play.
If you're down at Lars for a couple of weeks and it's your night off, there's not much you can do down at Lars, so you've got to make your own entertainment, and that's what we did.
So say about 10 or 12 of us walking along the front. We go over to the front at Langs, you know, there's no beach, pebbles, etc., you know, so we get on, and wee Jimmy Johnson gets on. You know, now it's about half a dozen of us, and wee Jimmy gets in his boat.
Believe it or not, I pushed Jimmy out. And there was funny stories about that. You know, I remember he couldn't get back in and he was singing his head off.
Sandy was telling me, was he the one that shoved me out? You didn't know the rest of it, did you? No. We were actually playing Rangers the following weeks. Sandy was trying to get rid of me. Nobody knows that, by the way.
And the next thing is 20 yards and say, you bet. And now he's 50 yards. It's like nothing. I say, hey, Jimmy, you better come back. And that's me, David Hay, I think Pat Stanton. And now he's 100 yards. I say, hey, Jimmy, come back. And, you know, oh, he's wrong.
So 2 other players who remain nameless went out to try and get him. And they started to paddle out. And the boat had a hole in it, and that started to sink.
And now he's a wee dot on the horizon. Now he disappears completely. I don't believe it.
Of course, with the noise we were making, I think we woke up a few people. And, of course, everything escalated. You know, it was just a bit of high spirits.
Willie Ormond's out at the front. And we get the Coast Guard, you know. Parahandy coming out of the harbour. And eventually, you know, they get him back. And, you know something? If any Celtic supporter had seen him, they'd have killed him. He was completely blue. You know, absolutely freezing. Completely blue, head to toe, you know.
Jimmy Johnston's flair for doing the unexpected was sadly not to be seen on the field during the 1974 World Cup finals. He was to stay on the bench throughout Scotland's games in West Germany.
Scotland trying to work a position. Jordan. Lorimer. 1-0. Bremner with a kick. Jordan's made a move. And through the goalkeeper, 2-0. David Hay. That's a good one by Hay. Rivellino, if he gets this full pelt from Lorimer, will feel it. It's a great one. What a shot. There's not much he really could do about that. He was running in on it. It was so near. Well, this is number 18 going through, and Jai flying dangerously here. Danny McGrain. There's a good one. It's a goal. Good run by Hutchison. And it's there. It's a goal.
Willie Ormond's achievement had been considerable. Having taken Scotland to the finals, he saw them through 3 games without defeat. Scotland had beaten Zaire and drawn with Brazil and Yugoslavia. Subsequently, he was to steer his team towards the next World Cup finals.
The equaliser, Kenny Douglas.
The The consistency of his success as team manager made it all the more unexpected when he fell victim to the extravagance of Scotland's footballing ambitions.
And not maligned, I think he was assassinated. I think Willie Ormond's career was ruined by the fact that a senior official in Romania suggested that we should perhaps look to someone else. Now, to me, that killed Willie Ormond off effectively. Willie Ormond was in tears in Romania. And after that, I think Willie Ormond was a shadow of the man. And Willie Ormond, to me, in travelling in World Cups, came as close as anyone in 1974 to really earning us glory, without a doubt. But Willie Ormond was so shabbily treated, I think that it was shameful.
All he'd done was to get us out of one World Cup undefeated and into another one. And they thought that wasn't good enough up at the SFA. And they voted 4-3. There were 7 of them. You know, the usual butchers, bakers and candlestick makers that think they can run football, knew more about it than Willie. And they treated him scandalously. And because he was a great man of honour, he just felt that he couldn't work with people who, to his face, were saying, "Good on you, Willie," and behind his back were just sharpening the daggers. And his going was sad. And what happened afterwards, the whole McLeod shambles in Argentina, just rather underlined the point. We'd have been better off if we'd kept him.
Few Scottish fans at the time would have agreed. Their support for Ally McLeod's team could be regarded as rather uncritical.
Masson to take it, and he's done it! He has done it, and the Scottish supporters are going mad! Willie Johnston.
The euphoria had already begun during the crucial qualifying game against Wales.
There's an overlap. Martin Buchan. Good running by Buchan, read it well. There's Kenny Dalglish in there. Oh, what a goal! Oh, yes!
The euphoria was to last all the way to Argentina.
I think that 18 months was possibly the finest 18 months that Scottish fans have ever had. Right, we maybe didn't win the World Cup, but they had a wonderful 18 months.
It was a bit disastrous when we had a man in charge before Argentina who was feeding our national genius for self-delusion. I mean, and a lot of people up there who now tend to take a hard line about what Ali did were charging to march under his fairly tattered banner before we went to Argentina. And I couldn't believe it at the time.
He got a nation going in a way that's never been done before or since and never will be done again. He brought us to the edge of insanity. I remember writing, after that interview, this huge "We Will Win, says McLeod" piece. And on the bottom, I tacked on a few lines of my own saying, great, well, I mean, optimism never hurt anybody, but realism would suggest that we're not going to do quite as well as Ally McLeod says. I had the biggest bundle of hate mail ever. People were writing in, "You're a traitor." One reader wrote in on a toilet roll and said, "I hope you die of cancer."
Perhaps it was that peculiarly Scottish combination of arrogance and self-doubt that made us hold a kind of celebration before the competition. Thousands of fans paid admission to go to Hampden to see the team leave.
I get the credit of that, and it was nothing to do with me, really. You know, it was Ernie Walker one day said to me, it would be a marvellous thing, he said, if we'd a send-off at Hampden.
It wasn't a lap of honour, anyway. It was arranged in conjunction with the police because we recognised that there were going to be tremendous problems and scenes from wherever the team left.
I said, we're celebrating with the World Cup before we've won it. Really, that's what you're doing.
It wasn't a celebration of winning the World Cup before we got to the place. It was people were saying, I think, that they were happy that we were in the World Cup. And, you know, it was a wonderful evening, and it was a wonderful gathering of family people and the patriotic night, etc. It wasn't meant to be boastful.
I didn't fancy it. I had more at Hampden for a game than some teams have for games, you know. Oh, it was terrible. I fell off. Oh, didn't really look for it. I mean, I can look back and laugh now. I didn't like it at the time. Oh, I didn't like it at the time.
I think Ali, and I'm sorry to say this also, was too busy selling carpets and didn't realise the enormity of what we're getting into. He was put against such as Ernst Happel and Menotti. It really was a boy against wolves, not men, wolves, because they are the mafia of football, and they won.
The money made from advertising gave rise to rumours of El Dorado proportions. Ali MacLeod, some said, was becoming a millionaire.
I've heard all these rumours. But see, all these people that say that, they're the millionaires. They're the ones that made the money. You know, it's a lie. I mean, that's a good story. So good. Someone once phoned me up and said, I hear you get this from this and here from that. And I said, oh, I just asked the income tax. They know what I got. And I mean, all these stories were investigated. What a ball,
Whatever the finances, it looked briefly as if the massive emotional investment of the Scottish fans was going to pay off.
And it's 1-0.
For part of an afternoon, they were glad they had come to Argentina. But the market in Scottish self-confidence had a sudden collapse. In the 3-1 defeat by Peru, the result was not to be the only embarrassment.
I took these 2 pills, Reactivan. I took them and I didn't even think about it. Didn't even think about a dope test, anything. After the game, we played terrible. We got beat, myself and Kenny Dalglish, and for a dope test. And I always remember into the jar, into the bottle, and mine was a terrible colour. You know, I was just honest. I'm going, it was colour of lager. You know, I'm going, it's not too clever that. I didn't even think about it. So I went back in the bus, back to our camp. Next morning, Ali sent for me. He says, your dope test is positive. He says, what did you take? I said, I took 2 tablets. Oh, that was a starting, you know.
Deep down inside me, I don't think honestly that Willie Johnson honestly believed he took drugs. But he took them, right? But I don't honestly think that he believed it. But with some laughs, you know, when we got a hold of the tablets, you know, I always remember the Celtic doctors saying, well, we better just throw them away, you know. And we're passing this field, I'll never forget it as long as I live. And there was a crowd of Argentinian cows. If you know, over there, they're very thin. And they were kind of walking about like that. And we threw the pills into the field. See, when we come back from the training that day, the cows were all jumping all over the place. They think I've made that story up, but that's a true story.
Maybe they should have put Scottish jerseys on them. Willie Johnston's dismissal from the World Cup seemed like an omen for Scotland. He travelled home to Britain to be met by his club manager, Ron Atkinson.
Big Ron done great for me. He did. He helped me at a right bad time. As I say, I didn't know what was happening. Couldn't phone. Couldn't get hold of the wife and that. And I came back, got off at Heathrow, and Big Ron was waiting for me. So he puts his arm around me and he says, wee man, he says, I've just signed you a great contract with Boots the Chemist.
Not everybody saw the joke. Ali MacLeod's team played next against Iran, who obliged by scoring for Scotland. But then Iran turned nasty and started kicking the ball towards the Scottish goal. Iran knew about football the way day trippers to Calais have explored France. They shouldn't have been much better than even money to win a football competition at a Butlins holiday camp. They drew with Scotland. The Scottish euphoria was degenerating into hysteria. Ali MacLeod began to look as if he had just stepped out of Shangri-La. There seemed nowhere to go but away. Fans who had travelled 7,000 miles with his promises for fuel didn't wish him a fond farewell. Scotland's venture to Argentina had begun to look like a psychological version of the Darien scheme. Reality had made the dream ironic.
We're going to the Argentine, and we'll really shake them up when we win the World Cup, 'cause Scotland are the greatest football team.
The funny thing about that record was, sold all these copies, and the day after Iran drew me as one each, a guy in Dundee was selling it for a penny and giving you a hammer to break it with, you know. And I put all the money that I made out of that single into an LP, you know, financed it myself, and it was released the day after we get beat, or we drew with Iran, you know. So there's about 30,000 lying up in Clarkson in a garage somewhere. Well, where they got to.
The old story where Mexico weren't doing well, right? So the Mexican manager said, we should be like the Scots. We should drink whiskey for breakfast. You know, I mean, right out the blue, whiskey for... I mean, so then everyone thought, if we've got a problem, we'll just tell it. We'll just blame it on the Scots. And that's what can happen.
And now Gemmell's got a chance to put Scotland 2-1 in front.
Scotland's last game was against Holland, a team destined to reach the final. Now that failure was virtually guaranteed, Scotland started to play well. Having gone 2-1 ahead with an Archie Gemmell penalty, they began to look like a team. They needed to win by 3 clear goals to reach the last stages. A further stunning individual goal by Archie Gemmell earned him the award for the best goal of the competition. It also took Scotland to within 1 goal of qualifying. The Scottish talent for disregarding probability began to reassert itself.
The miracle is beginning to happen. They need 1 more to qualify. And finishing like this is lethal.
And we were within that of making it. And I can remember when it went to 3-1, I think it was Robertson that played with Notts Forest. He shouted along, boss, he says, somebody up there likes you. You know, and that was the first time I can honestly say I can relax. And I thought, God, I'm going to... In my own mind, I thought, God, I'm going to make it. You know, and just then the Dutch lad got the ball in front of me, and I kind of said, go on, hit it. I mean, it was about 45 yards. Go on, hit it. See, when you hit it, and I'm right in the back of the net, I remember going, oh, God.
It was to be Ali MacLeod's last misjudgment of the World Cup. The despair of the players found an echo in a lot of Scottish homes.
Nobody could avoid it. I mean, we just had to skulk around and not talk to English people, and it lasted for months. Everybody in this country was reduced by what happened over there. And it was a sign how it's too important, football, for this country. Should have been given to somebody else, not us. Let them endure it. Let them endure the agony and the misery of seeing our sides get beaten. And, I mean, seeing them win as well. I mean, that's nice. But, I mean, on balance, it's a hard slog if you're into the football and into watching Scotland. It's a long, long, hard slog. Good moments in it, though.
The Scottish team's good moments have continued to be addictive, but the unrealistic optimism they have sometimes generated was partly diffused by the pragmatic management of Jock Stein. He introduced the Mr. Hyde of Scottish fantasies to the Dr. Jekyll of reality. He understood perhaps better than most the unhealthiness of a country whose nationhood is located where its sport should be. When Scotland qualified for the 1982 World Cup, Jock Stein made sure that unjustified expectations were not part of the luggage we took to Spain.
Brilliant pass forward. Well, there's a great goal.
His common sense kept Scotland's good moments in perspective. His realism foresaw the likelihood of defeat by Brazil. But Scotland still asks football to do more than most other nations ask of it. A country that is half asleep remains likely to dream. Under Jock Stein's managership, Scotland moved again towards qualification for the World Cup finals in Mexico. Alec Ferguson, his former assistant, has been left to complete the job as a result of Jock Stein's tragic death. As a World Cup draws nearer, it is hard for Scottish supporters not to feel a rush of optimism to the brain. But though Jock Stein is sadly gone, we remember his realism.
We don't mind if we go down. If we go down fighting and we go down the right way. Because winning World Cups at our level, a country of our size, you know, with 4 teams in our Premier League, it's very difficult even for us because our players look world beaters against some teams at home. And they're maybe not good teams that should get there against. I think it's quality you look for.
Sigurdsson, a great cross. The header, the ball is in the net.
But it is the nature of the Scottish game to rekindle expectations beyond the reach of rational analysis. The excitement of one good goal exists more vividly in the mind than any amount of reasoned argument. One success achieved with style, no matter what the standard of the opposition is, will convince the Scottish support that Scotland can perhaps be the equal of any team in the world.
Yes, we have that. We have delusions of adequacy where other countries have delusions of grandeur, but we still stumble through the minefields and thoroughly enjoy ourselves.
A good performance from a Scottish football team continues to give an extra shine to our sense of ourselves. In the successful player, we tend to see our own reflection, insubstantial as it may be.
This mixture of sort of arrogance and competitiveness, which is the good side of Scottish football, Scottish skills, that can slide off. I mean, there is a self-destruct button. I mean, this can all rapidly disappear overnight, leaving not a team, not a group or anything. Alan Sharp, the novelist, said to me, he said, you know, the trouble with Scottish football teams is there are 11 Scots in it. The perfect Scottish team would only have 3 Scots, and you pick other people.
Scotland's dream of being a great footballing nation is seldom interrupted by the facts, no matter how ordinary. Having won at Hampden, Wales were to fall foul of bad luck rather than good play from Scotland at Cardiff. The Welsh had gone ahead in the first half, but the decision about which of the two countries went forward from the match was to involve for the second time a disputed penalty. No matter how unspectacular the route had been, the destination had been reached for the 4th time in a row. It was the chance to see Scotland play on the world stage as their fans have always believed they can play.
Our idea of heaven on the field is to take the mickey, is to humiliate the opposition with extravagant displays of virtuosity. The English bury you under an avalanche of goals. Our great days are vividly recaptured in a million pub conversations. The thing is, of course, that 50 years on, a Brazilian or a Hungarian can get the message about what England did. We'd have to be there to tell them, but who cares? We've always known that the extent of our greatness is pretty much a private matter among ourselves. Nobody else really understands it fully.
But maybe we've learned by now that greatness needs a structure in which to happen.
The great thing about this pool is that there's a good spirit about the players. There's a good camaraderie among the players. It's almost like a club situation. Okay, that like even at club level you have particular players who like to room with one another. That hasn't changed. But there's no bickering, there's no pettiness, and it's a great feel among for me, looking at this situation and smelling it. And as a manager, you get to smell things. It's good. I like it.
Yet no matter how cautiously practical the manager's approach may be, the Scottish fans will go to the World Cup looking again for glory, travelling like the kings from the East in search of a miracle, following yet another star with a number on his back.
But in Mexico last year, Scotland failed to qualify for the quarterfinals of the World Cup again.